did a Mumbai entry through their online store, but like as I was telling Divya, it did not look like as if it was an online launch. It looked as if it was actually an entry into a geography called Mumbai. Right? I'm from Mumbai. I was pleasantly surprised when I saw the front pages. It was. It was. So, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on how, in today's era, customer experience, your aspect of brand promise, how do they converge, given the breadth of technologies that a consumer has access to today, and what is it that you do in your respective businesses. We would also love to hear some of the things that you failed in. I'm sure not everything went according to plan, right? So it'll be a nice idea if every one of us understand as to where could one possibly go wrong. Right? I mean, it's always better to learn from the mistakes of others, right? Right? Right. Thank you so much. So out here, the reason why I'm excited about this panel is we've got a brand which is 90 years old, Nalli Sarees, 90 years old, and she is the 5th generation which is managing it. So it's a huge continuum. A brand that is 76 years old worldwide, but 4 years in India, which is IKEA, very famous brand, and a relative newcomer who's 4 years old. Right? And he's probably the only reason why the average age of this group is going down a little. So let me start with you. So let me start with you. What made you get into this business? What made you think? How did you wake up one day and decide, no, this is something that this country needs and I'm going to do?
So I was actually heading the category of furniture and appliances in a very large e-commerce company prior to this. And post my graduation, I mean, I graduated from IIT Madras. Post that, I've shifted, quite a number of cities. So when it came down to, furnishing my own apartment, I didn't choose my own solution. While I was doing pretty good at the category, while heading the category at that, large e-commerce company. And the reason was because I was changing, people were changing jobs every 17 months or 18 months, leaving their houses, going to a different place altogether. And when I looked at this DNA, I found it across my network. My peer group was, doing the same. So it didn't make sense to relocate and, keep the baggage of, assets all across the cities. I didn't want to spend 50,000-60,000 rupees, in terms of furnishing my apartment. The next best option was possibly EMI. I could have availed it for 5,000 rupees a month, but that was also, something that as a millennial I could not have gotten out of whenever I want. I mean, so lease was one of the options that I thought doesn't exist here. EMI started off in 2011, and so far has been penetrated and one of the biggest catalyzers for the growth in India. But when I was looking towards US and UK, just like how people lease out cars, there was no lease concept or lease financing concept when you go out and try and purchase a furniture, appliances, or mobiles, for instance, because the need is only for 14 to 15 months. So it's a temporary need. You don't want to buy it. You just want to use the product for 14 to 15 months. And that's what Lease was bringing it out to the consumers. And that's what I thought, that this can be the new EMI. And that's why we started off.
And this was backed by some solid research, and the numbers kind of compelled you to believe that it could be done?
No, it was a bit of a gut that the rental doesn't exist, and thankfully the number says it all, because it's been 4 years that we are in the market. We are present in the top 8 major metro cities now, and over 100,000 subscribers now. So yeah, it's been picking up quite well in the subscribers.
So is the core question to buy or not to buy, or is there something more to it?
No, this is a form of buying. So we don't see it as a negation of buying altogether. People, today we are the exclusive partners for Samsung, and anybody who's getting into a Samsung store or an at-home store, or earlier they used to have 2 options. Either they could have bought a certain product, or they could have taken it on a EMI. We believe this is the 3rd form of buying. This is a way to utilize a product now. Use it for 15 months and then give it back. So yeah, this is a form of buying. We don't see it as a competition to buying or anything. This is the 3rd kind. You know, in a given store, there are only 35% of the people those who are converting. What about the rest 65%? Those are the people that are confused. Now, this can be as an option that can convert them a little better.
Lavanya, your category is saris, and 90 years old business, lots of brand equity. You have lots of customer advocates amongst your customers. So has the customer expectations really changed over the period of time that you've been in business?
Okay, so it's a complex question, but with a simple answer. Yes, the consumer has shifted. And the long answer is, if you look at the ways in which the consumer has shifted, what we're seeing is, I mean, the most obvious example, there's enough women in this audience, very few of them are in saris.
Sorry, can you hear her clearly? Okay, okay. Yeah. I'm not getting the feedback, sorry.
So, saris as a product, which is our mainstay, right? That's our core business. It used to be an apparel that women wore out of habit, and it was their regular mode. It was what they would wear on a regular basis. But it was custom, it was culture, it was habit, and there were all of those connotations and cultural aspects to it. What's happened over the years and accelerated in the last few years is women now choose to wear saris out of choice. And so they wear it for occasions. Some interesting dynamics have come up as a result of that. Previously, I think we'd find women who were completely fine with, borrowing their mom's saris. Now there's a lot of women who come in saying, no, I want to pick out something that speaks to me. Right? So this is from a qualitative perspective. What do we see when it comes to our consumer preferences? How are those shifting? So it's becoming, saris and fashion in general is becoming an expression of their personality. It's becoming an expression of their tastes. Alongside that, we see certain other shifts in the market, some macro factors, as more and more people move into the middle class, as more and more women start spending more of their hard-earned money on themselves and disposable incomes rise. We start to see that though the shift has moved from saris being worn regularly to it being worn on occasions, there are more people who have suddenly become part of our consumer base. And even among those women, as a percent of wardrobe or as a share of wardrobe, it may not be significant, but in an absolute term, interestingly, we're seeing more and more women actually buying more saris. And some of this I really have social media to thank, because the other day I heard, I was in the store and one of my customers came up and said, it's such a nightmare because I wore this sari and now all my pictures are on Facebook and I can't wear it to this other occasion, so I've got to come in and buy something else. And so it's interesting with the times how things have shifted, but I think multiple parameters are sort of there. There are headwinds and tailwinds.
Right. So I'll come back to that at a later stage in terms of the way a consumer shops for your category. Now coming to IKEA, I mean, you've been around globally for a long time. You've redefined the category. How do you see the global template working here in India as well?
I think the global template definitely does work in India. There is nothing that replaces the concept, I think, of IKEA. So what is it as a concept? The store is an experience. It's not something, and you mentioned earlier that we opened online yesterday. The challenge is then, how do you make online also the same experience as you get when you enter into an IKEA store? I think the one thing that does change in India is affordability becomes much, much more important, definitely, because of the price at which we can sell in India. I think the second thing that becomes important also in India is how do you reach more of the consumers, because the big box retail does not really, you don't have land for it in India, firstly. The second thing is also that you have, a lot of people are not able to go far. It's not like we have excellent public transport where you can take a metro and just, always go to an IKEA store and get that. So e-commerce, the digital channels, apps, the web, all becomes very important. And I'll give you a very classic example. Mumbai is the first place in the world where we have opened an online store before a physical store. So it's a groundbreaker actually in global IKEA. And that shows why India is different.
Yeah, and it also reflects the confidence that IKEA probably has It's a very risky move. I mean,
It
if for
is.
someone from the outside, it's probably a very risky move, given the fact that there is a brand legacy that you have to cater to. But I'm sure from the reactions that you've gotten over the past 2 days, things have been pretty good.
And also, I mean, you mentioned brand in your first statement here, right? And as to how important it is. And especially for IKEA, that's very, very important because it's been 75 years. Brand is what carries them through. The trust that the consumer has in the brand is extremely important. And I mean, Hyderabad, it made a lot of sense to open a physical store because the brand recognition was that much lower and it has gone up over time. But places like Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore have a large number of people who have traveled abroad, who have settled, abroad, come back with IKEA furniture. So the recall of the brand is that much higher. So yes, it was risky, but the one thing I know after yesterday's launch is it was a fantastic move because the way it has been received has been so good. And we are very happy we did it, though it was risky. So.
And getting back to you, who is your core segment? How do you define a core segment, or do you keep it a little iffy and just about anyone who wants your services are what you cater to?
No, so we are in 3 categories. So depending on the categories, TG changes a little bit, but largely it's the consumer which is in the first 6 to 7 years of their working class life. Between 19 to 32. That's the kind of age group that we are seeing. The average age turns out to be 28 for us. Because, as I keep saying, we are a lease rental platform for multiple categories. Today, the biggest category that we have is, appliances and electronics rather than furniture. The way temporary usage for a certain product comes in, with mobile, it comes very, very naturally because, people keep changing every 12 to 14 months. So there, the TG is pretty much anybody who's buying mobiles. For furniture and appliances, it's the guy who's living in a rental apartment. Because he's not living in his own apartment, because he has changed his house once, he's not living in his hometown, very likely he's likely to shift again. And that's the data that we are seeing, that everyone is changing jobs and changing houses within the cities as well within 15 to 17 months. So that's the TG that we have. Because your line of sight is only for 15 months. That's why you need a solution for that. So that's the kind of a TG, first 6 to 7 years of their working class life.
And from the mobility of your TG, you're probably looking at an intercity more than an intracity? An intercity move kind of lends itself?
Both. It's a big hassle to move around with a bunch of products that you have within the house. So whether you're moving within the cities or you're moving from one house to the other within a city itself, it's both a cumbersome, and that's why people are liking it. We just provide a free relocation to the new city that somebody is moving in or a new house that you're moving in. So all that kind of caters to the product servicing that we have.
So kind of you led me into my next question in terms of what are the ancillary services or experiences that you grant to your customers?
So as Divya said, that it's very, very important that affordability has been a great catalyzer for the retail. So we provide affordability, just like financing. 100 or maybe a 1 lakh worth of products altogether, we are able to lease it at close to about 3,000 rupees a month, whereas EMI would start at 5,000 to 6,000. So that we are able to do that. We are actually turns out to be cheaper than EMI because the product is not theirs. The product is owned by us, and we are leasing it out to the consumer. So we can always provide a better affordability than the financing solutions which are out there. Apart from that, as you said, the ancillary services ranges from providing free relocation to we take care of the repair and maintenance as well. And the best of all, I feel why consumers are really sticking to us is with most of the options which are right there, EMI, they can't get out of that contract. It's a fixed thing. If you've taken a 12-month EMI, you have to cross that bridge and pay the entire sum. In this, even if you change your mind in 6 months time period, you can just return the products and walk out. So that flexibility or a freedom which needed within a financing solution, that is what we are providing.
Yeah, the lowering of the entry and exit barriers in this case is very welcoming, right?
Yes.
That's one hassle off a person's mind as he's struggling with shifting homes.
So flexible financing is what we try and call it.
And regarding TG for saris, have you seen a difference? Have you seen an evolution You mentioned young women coming in and buying more for themselves than just not relying on legacy, but with their own mindset coming in with a frame of reference, which is their own. Have you seen a difference in the way women have come and shopped?
Yeah,
Do men come and shop for saris?
Yes. Very, I wouldn't, I guess reluctant is not the word, but I think very haplessly, but they do come in. So when it comes to the consumer, so typically it is the woman who shops. And there are a few things that have stayed the same and a few things which have evolved. The big evolution and the shifts that we've seen is truly in the consumer preference, how she shops for herself. Like I said previously, it was more this particular segment, when it comes to saris, it was more of a woman wearing it and buying it because it was the thing to do and out of habit. Till about maybe the 80s or the 90s. And then that shifted as more and more women started moving into the middle class, as they started working out of choice, not out of financial necessity, choosing to consume as a form of personal expression, not as a form of necessity. India itself as a whole shifting from a savings mentality to a consumerist and a spending mentality, all of these tailwinds sort of helped us. But as a result, what happened was we went through this period, I think, where more and more women, especially the urban, educated, working class, women who worked, started thinking that it's too cumbersome, a sari. It's inconvenient. I don't want to wear it on a regular basis. And interestingly, we've seen a shift again now, where there are these revival movements, and as the perception of the sari has really moved into something as a very special product, as a premium product. Look, I can afford to, buy this, and then I take the trouble to wear it. I think we're starting to see kind of like a full circle, right? Women come back, and there's a lot of so I think those two things are fundamental shifts. The sari isn't a convenient product to wear. That's one thing that I would just put out there, right? But neither are heels, and we wear them. Neither are ties. What do you need ties for? But you wear them, right? So there's a lot of things that we do, right? We put ourselves through trouble. And I tell you one thing with a sari, at least, it covers all of your flaws, and it's not going to give you bad posture. So bear that in mind. But I think some of these shifts which have happened are here to stay. With women, I think that shift, after our economy opened up in the 90s, and after we became from a savings mentality to a consumerist society, women and then the role of women and how they see the role of work in their lives as a form of, even work as a form of self-expression, financial independence for its own sake, not from a standpoint of necessity. I think these are good changes, and they're here to stay. And I'm also happy to see alongside that the perception and the shift towards a more appreciation towards handloom, towards craftsmanship, towards these kinds of products. I think those things are there to stay. Whether it will come back as a product to be used in the mainstay and to be used as a regular, as the apparel of choice remains to be seen. I suspect no. But as an occasional wear, I think it really is seeing a heyday.
Can I ask a question to her?
Yeah, please. So this is one different panel discussion. Here the members will be asking questions to each other as well. Okay? We're so curious about it. Yes, all yours.
So do you find women buying saris online?
Yes.
Yes.
So I spent, just give you a quick background. So I joined the family business in 2005. I'm the third generation. I was there for 4 years, and then I spent about 7 years outside of it, in which time I did my MBA, worked with McKinsey in the US, came back as a VP at Myntra, and then came back. So I did have a stint at an e-commerce giant before I rejoined Nalli. And the first thing that I did was actually set up our e-commerce division from scratch. And the eventual plan is to really take that omni-channel, because there is something, when you have a family business with this kind of footprint and this sort of brand equity, the best thing you could do is actually leverage today's technology and the strengths of everything that you bear. So if you have inventory in multiple different stores, and here's the beauty about especially handloom saris, every piece is unique, because there are no economies of scale. So that weaver is not going to, he's not going to bring out 10 of the same, because it's going to be the same painstaking detail. So every product is unique, and not only that, when we were confined to just real estate, we had to optimize the products within the store for maybe 80% of the market. And so there was a lot of customization of the product to those geographies. With e-commerce, all of that goes out the window. You really don't, you're only capped by, I don't know how much you're willing to invest in it. And so because of that, can you not provide these kinds of functionalities to your consumers now? Where someone who is who lives in Bangalore, but she's looking for a certain kind of patni sari or something, or a Parsi embroidery, something that she's not likely to find in this market. Can you not expose her to the inventory that you have available all across your entire brand, through your entire network, and make it available to her? Either bring it to the store, ship it to the store, or just ship it to her directly. So that's where we are now.
So, while I understand the optimism of e-commerce enabling a larger expanse, a larger reach, but yours is a category which is not just look and feel, it's look and feel and drape. Right?
What did people say about groceries? I want to touch it, I want to feel it, I want to make sure that it's fresh.
So, okay.
But, I mean, I buy a lot of stuff from Big Basket.
Right. So, assuming that, Sarees is a little more involved, if it's a look and feel and drape, because I don't think I've seen a lady buying a sari without trying it on herself, or at least the shopkeeper trying to put it on. I mean, some of the more enterprising shopkeepers put it on themselves, right? So how do you manage that aspect, the look and feel and the drape part of it?
So there's a couple of ways. See, one is an advantage which we have. The biggest issue actually with apparel is fitment. Now a sari just comes straight off the loom like that. I don't have to fit it. I can gain weight, I can lose weight, and it's going to be fine. So when fitment is not an issue, the bulk, the majority of the reasons for return just go away. Then there are certain other aspects, which is the color didn't match what I thought, or certain saris do have that, right? Like if you've got dual tone, then depending on like how it catches the light. And then we have metallic thread that runs through it. Again, all of that has to do with like how you're able to get a photograph, and then whether the light bounces, is the color oversaturated. There's a lot of like technical aspects to it. But by and large, the biggest issue why things get returned is really because they don't fit. And even in that scenario, there's a way to overcome it. Zappos did it, but then now all of the e-commerce players do it, which is if you don't like it, return it.
No, a pretty interesting perspective, because otherwise saris can be pretty cheap as well as frighteningly expensive as well. It could be 5 iPhones, 6 iPhones as well, right? I mean, or
I
more
don't know
than
if
that.
it's 5 iPhones.
That's a hapless husband, I'm sure, still speaking about it. Fitment, does it bother a person who's buying furniture?
I guess it's fitment to taste here. So, I think furniture as a category has also evolved a lot over the years, and especially in a place like India where we were used to the teak furniture, the very heavy furniture, and I think there has been a lot of a shift now to more trendy furniture. People are open to trying different things. There will always be the category that will come and that will say what is the wood that you're using, right? And be particular about it. And so that is why we have this thing called the price ladder, where you have different kinds of, so you can have the same kind of chair, but at different price ranges depending on the materials that are used in it. And I think that the more people get to know about it, the more it has really appealed to the consumer, because then they know that, okay, I mean, I can get something. Then you're meeting the affordability also, where you're saying that, yes, I can give you something, a sofa at 10,000, at 5,000. We have a two-seater, right, which is highly affordable. But at the same time, if you really want something which is, much more, I would say bulky in nature, or, from a material standpoint, much more durable, then you go for a much higher. I think there's also been, if you look at, so that is from a furniture aspect of it, but there's also the furnishing aspect of it. So I think it's interesting to see how much children's items, I mean, people really want to spend on their kids, right? People really want to spend on their kitchens. There are a lot of little small tools that are so useful. And the other thing that I think has changed is the convenience. So from looks to convenience. And I mean, one small example of that. So one of our products, for example, has this, so you have I mean, one of our classic problems is that when we serve somebody in our, who's seated in our living room, you actually bring out things on a tray, you keep it there, you take it away. So here it has a tray on top of a table, right? So you just take away the top of the table and take away the glasses or bring in. So small things like that, I think, have made life so much easier. I mean, they are tricks to make life easier, rather, your everyday life. And I think that is being appreciated a lot more in something, in a country like India, which, convenience is definitely has become so important. What utilities are there in the house have become more important because time has become scarce also. And with time becoming scarce, I think what we need in a household has really changed. We spend maximum amount of time in our house, but we need that time to be as optimized as possible. You need, wherever you're sitting, you need your mobile, a place to keep your mobile phone, you need a place to keep your cup of chai, and so how do you make that living space? So IKEA actually spent 5 years researching homes in India. And it's interesting to see how Delhi is so different from Mumbai, is different from, Bangalore, as to what we really need in a house. And that everyday convenience is what I think is going to make us successful.
Efficiency in living.
Efficiency.
Right? No, you rightly said, right? The houses are so very different. Right? A 5,000 square feet house in Gurgaon could be matched with, let's say, a similar 5,001 in Hyderabad, can probably be matched by a 1,000 square feet house in Mumbai. So that's where the literal fit comes into picture as well, as to how do I make sure that it fits into my space. So how does IKEA work with consumers around taking that doubt out?
So again, it's about the research that we have done. And if you look at, for example, our Hyderabad, so we have this concept that first when you enter the store, you have showrooms. And then actually you go into the places where you buy. The showrooms in Hyderabad are going to be very different from the showrooms in Mumbai, to your point, because small space living is so high in a place like Mumbai that it's going to be about how do you combine the place where you keep your keys to the place you keep your shoes to whatever into one unit, right? And how do you arrange your space into 1,000 square feet versus in a place like Delhi, it will probably be, okay, you have this 5,000 square feet, how do you do it, right? And there it is more about, I mean, the way you arrange things are so different. The kind of furnishings, the type of furniture you use is so different. And, but the beauty of it is that because the range has everything from small space living to that large space living, it is about what do you really put into that range for a particular market. And not about, creating something new because it all exists. It's about how do you really position it to make the best out of a household in a particular location.
So, Geetansh, how do you reach out to your customers? How do you engage with them? Which are the different channels? Are you active on social? What is it that you do?
So the basic stuff, right? I mean, what most of the e-commerce companies do, that unfortunately only 2 or 3 brands are making this market right now in terms of the lease rental. So whatever market is there, we capture it from Google. We do a lot of display campaigns across Facebook, and we keep on telling the people about these ancillary services and the value adds that we do. So we get a lot of crowd from there. But at the same time, we tie up with the other retailers. So we never want to force fit a consumer to take a particular kind of furniture or a kind of TV or a kind of appliance that we want. As I said, we are more of a payment solution or a financing solution than a retailer. So, it can be a product of IKEA or it can be a product of, Samsung or Apple. I mean, we just want to make his life easy with respect to the financing of it. So we tie up with the retailers as well. So today, if a consumer is walking into a Samsung store, now they'll be able to take a mobile phone on lease rental from there. So these are primarily a couple of channels, like online and offline integration with the retail partners. So sort of omnipresence.
What about you? What about Nalli? How does Nalli talk to their customers? How do they remain in touch?
So I think similar now with the advent of technology, social media, smartphones, the touch points with the consumer are so diverse and they're almost continuous. They are continuous. Right? But I think the main one that we still focus on really is in the experience at the store. And one of the reasons is because I go back to what is this brand? What are our values? What do we stand for? And there's a lot of options now in the market and the consumer, both because the technology has become so cheap and so available to everybody. And as other retailers start using it, you've got to also be a little market sensing. They do shift it's sort of a synergistic thing where the consumer preferences kind of are evolving, and then the market sort of adapts to it, and then it turns into this sort of positive cycle. So we've got to be aware of it. Having said that, being aware of it and then intentionally choosing what your strategy is are two different things. So what we focus on is really the product at the base of everything. We still focus on everyday fair value. So we don't do any discounts. We haven't done any discounts since 1940s. Back then it was considered a very strange thing to do, because till that point everything was haggled pricing. So if a customer came in a cycle or she came walking, then she had a certain price. If she came in some other mode of transport, she had a different price. And in 1940s, the philosophy and the thought process behind that by whoever was at the helm, which was my great-grandfather at the time, was basically, look, we know what the product is worth. There's quality raw material. We're not going to go below a certain standard. And there's craftsmanship, and we're only going to choose to work with these craftsmanship. And so they had their criteria to say that there's a minimum standard of quality. And that's what the brand stands for. If you buy a Nalli sari, you're assured that this is going to last you years, and you might possibly want to pass it on to the next generation. Everything else is non-essential. So if everything else is non-essential, we don't have the margin, right, to kind of do this high-low pricing and then to do this liquidation event. What we do is we basically empower the store, the store heads, and they take care of merchandising as well as everything, right? They take care of the merchandising for the store. But coming back to the question and then what you asked about it, what is it about the consumer experience? One part is really depending on your core values, and one of that for us is the product is key. We focus on that. We don't play around with pricing. We don't play around with like a lot of sort of marketing and promotions. And the result of that is a Nalli customer will never have buyer's remorse. Did I pay too much? Should I have waited? Could the sari gone on a discount? She's never going to think that, because it's not going to go on a discount.
I think that's great. No buyer's remorse is any retailer's or any brand owner's dream. I think that's fantastic. But there have been two questions I've been aching to ask you. Do you see this phenomenon of saris on rent, or do they happen?
It's an interesting question. I've heard very polarizing responses from my consumers. Most of the Nalli customers are dead against it. They're dead against it, and because for them it's a work of art, right?
And it's an expression of themselves, right? So
It's an expression of themselves. They spend. If you've ever seen a woman shopping, especially shopping for saris, if you haven't, come by to our stores. It's something to watch, because if you're in retail, you really have to observe this. She will spend 4 hours and she'll look at 100 pieces, and then she'll select 20 pieces. She'll send 10 to the cashier, to the cash counter. There she'll pick out maybe 5. And then in the last 10 minutes, she'll catch the sales boy and say, okay, now you know what my preference is. You go get something for my son and my husband and my brother. And she'll make pretty much the same amount in what I call like auxiliary purchases, but she would have spent 4 hours picking out that 1 or 2 or 3 saris for herself, and then she would have spent 4 minutes on the other aspect of it. But for women, and this is true in general of any consumer, the more involved you are, the more high touch point it is, right? The more you put of yourself into the shopping journey, the less likely you are to like part with it.
And the second question that I wanted to ask you is, since some of these are very high value items, right? I know this is out of personal experience. It's about storing these saris and different weather conditions, different sari material. Now I know I'm kind of walking on the fringe right now on this, but do you see sari storing, or or I don't know, keeping it for an event as something that a consumer would need? Because every house may not have it. I mean, it could be a 30,000 worth sari, it could be a 5 lakhs, it could be a 10 lakhs worth saris. And these are expensive ones. Is that a challenge, or is that a figment of my
I
imagination?
don't look at any, that's an interesting thought. I don't look at anything as a challenge. The way I look at it, as an industry, anything, even if there's competition that comes in, even if there's new entrants that come in, right? There are designers who are getting into it. The more noise there is about it, the more it gets into the mainstream consciousness, the more people sort of evolve their own attitudes towards saris. I think that's a good thing for the industry as a whole.
But have you heard from your consumers in terms of you being able to manage the storage part of it?
No, storage not so much. I mean, we get technical questions. How do you ensure that the silver sari doesn't tarnish, and things like that? How do you air it out? How do you wash it? How do you get these stains out of it? Those are the kinds of questions that we have. But I do know that there are some interesting models out there which are very peer-to-peer.
Right.
So all these like sari lovers get together and they form their own groups, and then they sort of trade saris. I don't know how that works, but I mean, whatever works for people, I guess.
And do you organize tours for your highest spenders to, let's say, Madurai and spend an evening with the weavers kinds?
No, we don't do that, but honestly, that is something that we are considering right now. We've never had, like I said, it goes back to the point, product is key, right? And the shopping experience is key, and everything else to us is really window dressing. That said, the number of hardcore Nalli customers who have come in saying, why don't you have a loyalty program, has been deafening, right, in the last few years.
Your
To the
answer
point
has been?
where to the point where now we're looking at it and we're saying, look, if we want to have a loyalty program, because look, you can't buy loyalty with points. That's not loyalty. That's captive audience. That's not loyalty. They're not, I mean, for them to be loyal to you, they've got to choose you over everybody else, even when there's nothing holding them back. If we do design one program, and I think we will do that fairly soon, what we want to do is create the kinds of experiences for our top customers that money can't buy. It could be access to a Carnatic music show, but something that's a private concert, something that's private, something that's really, really a memorable experience, and something truly that money can't buy. Because to me, that's the kind of customer service that I want to bring out there for my customers.
I mean, that gladdens my heart to a great level, because at a very personal level, that's what I do. Divya, everything couldn't have happened, couldn't have gone to plan. Something must have slipped. Give us an example of what didn't work.
Give me one business where everything goes as per plan. So,
That's why I'm confident.
yeah, I think,
Or,
I mean, of
or
course,
something that the audience needs to be aware that, while it might look very obvious, maybe it's not. Maybe it's time to just step back and take a relook.
I think I would point out two things. One is that, I think time plays a key role in anything you do. And in a business like ours, where we are into large format stores, it takes time. It takes time to procure land, it takes time to, construct it, it takes time to get to the customer, right? And by the time that you're down that journey, a lot of things change from a consumer standpoint, from other standpoints. And I'll give you a classic example. I'm sure if you looked at our plan quite a few years back, or the media reports quite a few years back, we were speaking only large format stores in India. Right? If you look at the media now and the things that we are, communicating, which is exactly as per our plan, we're talking a lot more online, we're talking a lot more small format stores. Small format stores are not really very common in the world, in IKEA. But India needs it, because we cannot always procure those large pieces of land, we cannot always construct them, and that's not where the consumers are to a large extent. So we will end up having many more small format stores in India than probably anywhere else in the world. And those plans have evolved over time. So it is not something that we came out with 5 years back and said, this is exactly how it's going to be. But every year, then, we have to be open. So when you said something to learn, I think the one thing to learn is that your plans have to keep pace with your, the realities of life and your strategies. Because what can you do, what can't you do? How do you really keep pace with that fast enough? And if you really want to grow fast, the world is moving very fast. You cannot, I think, any longer have 5-year plans and stick to them. You need to really know what you're going to be doing in 12 months' time and how you're really going to be getting out there in 12 months' time, maximum.
So course correct your business plans
Course
as and when
correct,
necessary.
as and when, required. I think the second thing I would also say, and, the one thing I've not heard spoken enough about today's fulfillment, right? Because we speak a lot about customer, we speak a lot about experience, but how do you really match your fulfillment to it? And I'm not saying it's something that is challenging or not. It is something that is so core to all our businesses, all the retail businesses. And that again has to keep pace with what you're doing, because you can't suddenly have your warehouses in some place and then, I mean, suddenly tomorrow say I'm opening e-commerce in a different place, right? I mean, so on the one hand, I talk about having, course correcting often, but on the other hand, it's also important to make sure that your fulfillment strategy actually keeps pace and is flexible enough to actually match a last mile delivery. I heard that a couple of times today, right? How important is that? That is so critical. And in a business like ours, so for example, we call ourselves DIY, right? I mean, she was speaking about investment in what a consumer feels. IKEA was the first furniture maker to say, let's do it yourself, because the investment, emotional investment you put in building that, bookcase or that thing, and I've done it myself. I used to live in the US and I used to actually assemble that. You can't part with it after that, after you've spent that amount of, time doing that. But does that really always apply to everybody today? He's speaking about rentals, he's speaking about the fact that people move all the time. Not everybody wants to invest that, right? So in India, we have probably the largest assembly service than we have in the rest of the world. And the reason for that is that India as a market, I mean, apart from the fact that we are fundamentally not do-it-ourselves people, it's also the fact that people move, people do other things. Time is premium, right? And you don't want to be spending that time doing do-it-yourself. Then you need the option of doing what. So I think a lot of things change over time. A lot of things have to be, constantly looked at. I wouldn't say they are challenges, or I wouldn't say that they're things that have gone wrong. But I think it is important, and we've learned to constantly look at what we are doing and, to make it relevant.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. And Geetansh, in your journey, within the four walls of the room, something that you did and you wish you never did?
Nothing stays within the four walls.
In the internet world,
rightly
yeah.
pointed out, I don't think there's any business. I mean, every year we have blueprints and, plans and projections for the next 1 year, but nothing goes. So they're hiring, hiring becomes a challenge at times, that goes a little haywire. For us, we've raised over, being a small setup, we've raised over 500 crores so far. Back in the initial days when we started off leasing out all these products, we were doing out of our own money. I mean, our own equity capital that we were raising from the investors. And quickly we realized that this is not going to be scalable. We need this capital for the products from somewhere else. So, the plan was, of course, to, keep spending your own equity capital, but slowly and gradually we started tying up with we started speaking with the banks. And at that point in time, we'd only raised about $2 million back in the day. So banks were not entertaining us. So because the things were not going in plan, we started raising out capital from high net worth individuals and, folks in our network. And that led to now in the past 3-4 years, now we work with some of the biggest banks, NBFCs in India. So that helped us build our, credibility and history of paying back. And we became like a financing setup. So nothing went as per plan. And this was one great challenge that we faced. And I think the way we innovated, that really set the stone for us and, made us a financing DNA rather than a retail.
Good. I mean, that's Startup 101. Thank you so much. The last point from you, Lavanya, in terms of, is there something that you could have done 10, 15 years back when you look back? Wish I came into this earlier.
No. No, because I think hindsight is always 20/20. The other thing is, it's always going to evolve, right? There's no way 10 years ago you could have known what the market's going to be like today, because there's far too many variables, right? Nobody could have seen the recession coming. Nobody could have seen so many things. Like nobody could have seen the internet economy in India opening up to what it is today. 2005 when I joined, it was, there was almost this laughable commentary on the fact that people were saying, oh, more and more people are going to shop from malls. And they said, no one's ever going to shop from a mall. But you look at it today, right? It's, most businesses do look at that. So it's not just all high street locations where physical retailers go to. They do look at malls, and there's a lot of legitimate malls. And these aren't just about footfalls, just like true conversion there. So country evolves, consumers evolve, right? Like trends happen, things shift. I think the most you can do is really try to be plugged in. If anything, more so today than at any point in our past. We've got to be much more market sensing. And we also have the tools today to be able to seize upon those opportunities just thanks to the leveling power of technology.
And the onus is on us because the time to react is getting shorter and shorter, right, as we go along. As long as we keep ourselves flexible and aware of external stimuli, I think we're all good.
But I would like to add one thing. I think we could never know what the future will bring, but the one thing that I think, does keep going on in the mind is what is the next big thing? Because I think we all are right now in a space where we are doing what we can to catch up with the consumer right now, right? But what would that consumer want 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line is something that, of course, we cannot future gaze. But at the same time, I think we do need to keep it at the back of our minds, because if we are not already there mentally, to be flexible enough to get there, then we're going to, I'll give you a simple example. I was fascinated. We have this unit we've set up called Space 10, which is a combination of designers, artists, technologists, etc. in Europe, who are basically looking in to see what could be the next big thing, right? What are all the numerous, and it could be relating to sustainability, which we feel very, very strongly about. It could be, other things. One thing that never struck me that came up is that, self-driving cars, right? Now, IKEA is all about the home, right? We don't normally look at cars. Cars are not a part of our business. But the moment cars become self-driving, what you need to do in a car is something very different than what you currently do today. So cars are going to become more entertainment spaces, cars are going to become more meeting spaces. So is there really going to be a complete redesign of the interior of the car because what we will be doing is something different? So, I think that is really, so how do you think through that? That's just one example, but there could be 20 others, right?
Sure. Yeah, possibilities are immense. And one definite possibility is someone holding up a time up card. So that's done. I'll just take one question. Yes, I'll take just one question so that we are efficient on this and we get to our lunch faster.
So, question for Lavanya. I'll give you one of my experience. This is at your Hyderabad store. So my mom was with me, and she had to buy something for my friend. So we went up to the counter, and she asked for, show me some saris, and the store boy got a lot of saris there. My mom was wow. My friend had a completely different emotion. So basically what I'm trying to say is that your product has appeal or usage to various generations, from a baby boomer to a X, Y, Z. However, the store experience seems to be very catered to an older generation. At that moment, I immediately looked at the store staff to see what is he going to do about that thing. He didn't do anything. Then I looked around and I saw a pattern. I saw that all the store staff were predominantly male, mostly from a certain community, mostly older, and they were very happy catering to mom and others, but not to a Y and a Z generation. So what would you like to do to cater to that generation within your store? Number one. I have one more question, similar. As a brand, is it evolving to cater to the younger lot? My older generation would talk about, going to Nalli's, but none of my friends does. So, for example, how many Nalli sari would you have sold in Myntra?
So we don't list anywhere else.
Okay.
But that's the simple answer to that. We've taken that strategic call not to list anywhere else.
But the purpose of the question was different.
Yeah, because that's not our customer for strategic reasons. Like, we've taken that call. But to the first, thank you for the feedback and the observation. I'll ask a different question, right? Have you ever seen men at our store and how they are handled by our sales boys? And the best way to observe this is actually to go into one of our flagship stores down in the south, right? As soon as you enter, and this goes against everything that you read about real estate and basically everything that you read about the retail store layout. As soon as you enter, the first thing you see is a set of empty chairs. And you think, why is this store using such prime visibility instead of having focal points and instead of having mannequins and displaying the product draped and so on and so forth? Why do they have these, these very functional looking wicker chairs here? And the reason is, every time a woman comes shopping with her husband and her kid, she sees those chairs, she goes straight, parks them there. There's a sales boy who's hovering around. He comes immediately, swoops in, gives the man a newspaper, gives him a cup of filter coffee, babysits the child, and the lady shops for 4 hours. If we didn't do that, she would shop for 10 minutes. The child would be like pulling on her sari constantly. The husband would get irritated. He wants to go home. So some things may not seem very obvious, but I think the answer to your question is most of the times, and this is the issue with frontline, anybody who's worked with frontlines, what they do is, this is all heuristics, right? You look at it and with time and practice, you've identified who your consumer is. What happens online? It's the same thing. If you know that this woman has purchased this is her digital footprint, she's more likely to pay this excellent and delightful shopping experience for everyone.
Thank you. So I hope you guys had a good time listening to the 3 folks on ground here. It was a personal privilege and honor speaking with you. Thank you so much. And now we shall break for lunch, but not before we felicitate the 3 of you with mementos. So if someone could get the mementos out, please. Yes, you can come out.